Today I'm down in Paso Robles, California with the least expensive all-wheel drive vehicle you can buy in North America. This is the new 2024 Subaru Impreza. Think of this as the slightly less expensive and more on-road focused version of the Subaru Crosstrek. The two vehicles are very similar, but they have very different missions in mind. The Impreza and the Crosstrek have long been closely related, but in the past you would logically say that the Crosstrek was based on the Impreza, and for this generation, I sort of think that the Impreza is based on the Crosstrek, although Subaru won't comment directly on that. A lot of what has made the Crosstrek the best-selling Subaru and the best-selling small crossover in America benefits the Impreza as well for 2024, but again with that different mission, so we get a very different front-end look. What do you think of the new design, Brian?
Well, hey everybody, first of all, I just want to point out, I really like this blue paint color that's exclusive to this RS trim, and I believe also the Sport trim for this year.
What are they calling it? Because it's sort of electric Smurf.
Ooh, let's just keep it at that. I like
electric
that name.
Smurf, that's a good one.
But with this paint color, I like on the RS trim the glossy black grille treatment. It does make this look sportier and more street-oriented, as opposed to the Crosstrek, which is more dirt-oriented.
And there's no RS badging up front that I just noticed.
No,
Somehow I
no.
thought that there was, but no RS badging there. Helping differentiate this from its more rugged brother, we get shiny black trim bits instead of the large expanses of rough black trim, and then we get a very different, more elegant grille that I think is really well integrated with the front-end design. The main reason the Impreza-Crosstrek relationship is closer than ever before is this is the only way the Impreza will come. It's hatchback only for 2024. What do you think about the loss of the sedan, Brian?
Well, to be completely honest, I preferred the sedan last generation, but according to Subaru, I was probably one of the only ones.
Yeah, apparently 80% nearly of Subaru Impreza shoppers were opting for the 5-door, and that's why they decided just not to make a sedan variant. I think it also works with the Subaru demographic, right?
Absolutely. It does enable more outdoorsy activities, more lifestyle adventure type activities for people who buy this, so I think it makes a lot of sense.
It's unquestionably more practical than the sedan. I think this format looks pretty good in this generation.
It does look really good. I think if they had brought back a sedan, I actually would have preferred this hatchback.
Over the last few years, Subaru's most popular models have been this same format of vehicle, the Outback and the Crosstrek. This shares the greenhouse with the Crosstrek, and then of course we have the Subaru Forester, which is certainly more boxy, more traditional SUV shaped than this. But let me know what you think in the comment section. Does this look more like a hatch? Does it look more like a wagon? I'm actually getting a bit more of a wagon vibe from the longer and sleeker profile in the Impreza, and for me at least, I think that's a good look.
These wheel designs are exclusive to the RS trim, as is the RS badge you see right up there on the front door. We've got one on the other side of the car and on the back, and to me, it kind of reminds me of the Toyota 86 logo.
Helping differentiate the Impreza and the Crosstrek, we obviously don't have the body cladding, but the other thing you'll notice, we don't have the big roof rails either. You can add roof rails to your Impreza, but no model is going to come with them standard. That gives this much more of a sleek roof look. It also improves the aerodynamics and likely improves wind noise just a little bit out on the highway. Big thing to know about the roof rails that are available from your Subaru dealer. They're not the same ones that you'll find on the Crosstrek because the mounting locations are a little bit different. And as a result, the Impreza does not have the 700-pound roof tent rating that you find in the Crosstrek. So if you want to take your family and a few Labradors, pop them in a tent on top of your Subaru, you want the Crosstrek. If you just want to put bicycles, skis, snowboards, surfboards, etc., then this is going to be just fine.
Another notable difference visually between this and the 2.5-liter equipped Crosstrek models is that on those, Subaru blacks out this portion of the hatchback, but here on the Impreza, they keep it body colored. Let me know what you think is better looking.
As we see in other Subaru models, the tail lamps are combination style lamps, so LEDs for the brake light and the accent lights there, incandescent lights for the amber turn signal, and the backup light in the back, but you know, we at least get an amber turn signal. The new RS trim is more than just badges on the doors and this electric Smurf paint job. We find more power under the hood as well. This is a 2.5-liter 4-cylinder boxer producing 182 horsepower, 178 pound-feet of torque. Although the displacement is familiar, this is actually a different 2.5-liter engine than we've seen from Subaru before. For this generation of the 2.5, Subaru has really focused on refinement. They've reduced vibrations by more than 20%. You will certainly notice that at idle, and at full throttle acceleration, the engine not only feels better, it sounds better as well.
If you don't go with the RS trim, the other Impreza models will come with the smaller 2-liter version of that boxer engine, and it makes 152 horsepower, 145 pound-feet of torque. That engine is rated at 30 miles per gallon combined, whereas the 2.5-liter is rated at just a hair less, 29 miles per gallon combined. Like the new Crosstrek, there's no longer a manual transmission available. You only have the option of a CVT.
Depending on how you want to look at things, there is an Impreza sedan, and there is an Impreza with a manual transmission, and there is an Impreza with a turbocharged engine. That would be the Subaru WRX, which is related to the Impreza. They don't share anything back here, of course, because it is a sedan with an actual trunk lid, and the rear seats are a little bit different as a result, but the interior up front is very, very similar, and the structure of the vehicle just about as similar as some sedan and hatchback corollaries in the competition. So again, depending on how you want to look at it, there sort of is a continuation of the Impreza line as a sedan, but they've really focused that on customers that want something faster, sportier, and are willing to pay more, because the WRX is certainly more expensive than this. Front seat comfort is pretty similar to other Subaru models. This particular version has the optional power seat. It's available in the mid-level trim and in the RS trim, but it's not standard in either model. It's worth noting the passenger seat remains manual even in this top-end version. We have a manual tilt telescopic steering column as well, with a pretty decent range of motion. I find the seating position to be a little bit more upright than the average hatchback or average sedan, likely because of that crossover relationship with the Crosstrek, and we get a pretty decent amount of headroom. I have about 3 inches of headroom above me with this seat all the way down on the floor. Now the seat does have a little bit more bolstering, at least it feels like it, than we find in the Crosstrek, although the general seat design is very, very similar. That could have something to do with the fact that Softex is not available in here. That would be the imitation leather product that is available in the Crosstrek. All of these seats are going to be cloth, and they are going to grip you a bit more. Jumping into the back, we certainly have more room back here than you'll find in the Corolla hatchback. That is pretty tight in the rear because it's a smaller vehicle. With this front seat all the way back at its tracks, I have about 2 inches of legroom left. One interesting twist though, no air vents back here for the rear seat passengers, although they do get USB charge ports. As you'd expect, the rear seats fold flat, but not quite flat with the cargo area in the back. Behind the manual hatch, we get just under 20 cubic feet of storage space. Definitely enough room to put these 22-inch roller bags in this vertical position. You could actually even put one right there like that and close it, because the glass actually bulges out a little bit, so it doesn't even touch the glass in that position right there. So this is a pretty large and practical cargo area. Definitely a little bit bigger and more useful than the ones we find in some of the smaller hatchbacks this is going to compete with. I also appreciate the fact that Subaru gives us an actual roller cargo cover rather than one of those weird little flip fold things. On the downside, the shoulder belt for the center rear passenger comes out of the side of the Crosstrek, and that means if you load it up, it's going to be bopping that shoulder belt and annoying that middle seat person. Following the rabbit down the hole, we have a foam divider rather than a spare tire under here with a can of Fix-A-Flat and a jack. But if we try and pull this out of the vehicle, it does come out. We actually find the attachment point for a spare tire under there. So if you wanted to put a compact spare in here aftermarket, you could do that, and you could just order some of the Crosstrek parts from your Subaru dealer. As we look around the interior, keep in mind this is a fully loaded model, so we have things like the power moonroof over here. It is a pretty standard size design, just over the driver and front passengers' heads. But all models are going to have the standard eyesight system right here behind the rear view mirror. So we have a 3-camera setup, one here in the middle and then 2 on the outsides. Those give us adaptive cruise control functionality, autonomous emergency braking, and all the other active safety stuff you'd expect. The driver and front passenger get height adjustable shoulder belts, 2-way adjustable head restraints, and as you can see, Brian has plenty of headroom back there. How much have you got back there, Brian?
I would say maybe 3 or 4 inches.
For 2024, every Impreza will have cloth upholstery, but it's going to change based on the trim level. In this RS trim, we have a tricolor setup, so charcoal here, a sort of medium gray in this section that wraps around the seat face, and then red accents going from the seat back all the way down there to the seat bottom cushion. Then in the middle of the seat, we have a combination of those 2 colors, sort of a light gray, dark gray, and then little tiny red accents going on there in the middle. It's an attractive and definitely a grippy seat texture, but I am surprised that we don't find leather or imitation leather available at all. Those red accents continue as we move over to the doors. You'll find them right there on that soft touch armrest insert. The upper section of the door has a fabric covering on the top there. Then we have harder plastics all the way around. The general design of the doors and the dashboard is the same as the Crosstrek. So moving over to the dashboard, we find a rubbery upper section of the dashboard, hard plastic with texture right here in the middle. If I zoom in on that, you can see that little diamond style texture there. And then we get a trim panel running right across the dashboard that's more of a matte finish. It's not distinctively textured like the others. Below that, we find a fairly large bin-style glove compartment. You'd have no problem fitting a large tablet computer inside. And then moving to the middle of the dashboard, we have definitely the defining feature of this interior. It's this large, just under 12-inch LCD infotainment system. This is very similar to what we see in other Subaru models. It supports wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. Up here, you'll notice that we don't have the X mode selection that you do get in the Crosstrek, but we get all the other features from that model. Physical controls down the side of the display, and multiple different ways of interacting with some things. For instance, if we go over here to the climate control, you can adjust the temperature on the screen or with the physical buttons. Now, what's interesting about the Impreza is, like other Subaru models, this screen is practically standard. You'll find it in the top two trims, which are going to be most of the trim levels available, and even in the base model, we get a variant of this with two different LCDs in the dashboard rather than just one. It really is an interesting twist. Below that, we have some USB charge ports right there. Those will also interface with the system. We have an auxiliary input jack, Qi wireless charging mat down there, the engine start-stop button, a pretty conventional console shifter with a manual mode over here on this side, toggle switches for the seat heaters. Subaru says that these seat heaters are going to heat much faster than previous generations. Down here we have the electric parking brake, two big cup holders, a 12-volt power port, softly padded center armrest, and then a reasonably sized storage compartment right in there. I don't think a half-gallon of milk would fit, however. On the driver's side, we have an analog instrument cluster with red accents, just as you'd expect out of the sportier trim, and then a small multifunction display in the middle of everything. The steering wheel continues the red accent theme with the red stitching. 3-spoke design, paddle shifters on the back are available. You won't find those in the base model, although I do think they are a little bit silly in a vehicle with a CVT. Over here we have the infotainment controls, track forward, backward, volume up, down, and then we have some controls that mainly relate to that multifunction LCD right there. On this side we have the controls for the adaptive cruise control system, the lane steering assist system, and basically drive mode selectors for the SI system. That's sharp and intelligent. Now it's time to get the Impreza out on the road. Obviously this is going to feel different than the Crosstrek because we are much closer to the ground, and Subaru has certainly put a more firm suspension on this vehicle as well. You'll really notice that we don't get as much tip and dive, so if I stomp on the brakes, things stay really quite level, and if I speed back up here again and waggle the steering wheel, there's not as much body roll as you see in the Crosstrek.
I do think Subaru's done a really great job of giving this the sportier vibe. Now, of course, this is the RS trim. We can't speak for the other ones, but I think it's really good. It's surprisingly fun to drive.
I suppose one way to think of this is that this is the sportiest trim of the sportiest version of the Crosstrek.
Yeah, and I definitely feel like the power difference between this engine and the 2-liter we drove in the Crosstrek is pretty palpable. I mean, when Alex punches the throttle,
yeah, let's go ahead and do that.
My head hits this headrest, and that is something you did not say in that other Crosstrek. But if you want that, if you want to save a little bit of fuel economy, it's actually not that much of a difference.
Yeah, it's only 1 mile per gallon difference. But there is a reasonable performance difference between the two. 0 to 60 in the 2-liter model is going to be pretty similar to the Crosstrek, so maybe about 8.5 seconds, 0 to 60 or so. This model's probably going to be closer to 7.5 seconds, maybe 0 to 60. So definitely a reasonable difference there. And the CVT does have kind of a split personality that I should mention. So if I just come to a stop here, and from a complete stop, regardless of the mode I'm in, if I floor it, wait for it, wait for it, wait for it, we will eventually hit about 6,000 RPM. Then the engine just hangs out right there because then it starts varying the ratios.
Yep.
If, however, we are already moving, and if I come down here to say maybe about 10 miles an hour, floor it, the ratio shifts aren't as rapid as the Honda Civic, but you'll notice it shifted. Key thing to know here is that those imitation shifts are actually going to increase your 0 to 60 time if you're starting from a rolling stop. And there's no way around it. The only way to get that faster 0 to 60 time is just floor it and keep it floored right from the stop. As far as the brakes, I found them pretty decent. I mean, they have a good linear feel to them. The engagement is nice and firm.
Yeah, they definitely stop you pretty soon. I mean, there's no mushiness to them. There's no vagueness. It's pretty direct, yeah.
And this is probably going to have the shortest stopping distance in the lineup because we have 225 with tires and we have that more stable feel from the suspension tune.
Yeah, and even though 225s aren't exactly wide, in the corners, the grip is pretty impressive with even these. These aren't all-season tires, but they are not exactly sporty tires, but they're doing a really good job in these curves.
Obviously, performance and handling are going to change based on the trim level you get. The base trim does get skinnier tires, but any way you slice it, this certainly sounds more refined than the previous generation Impreza.
I was just going to say, it definitely has a smoother engine note to it. It's not as gritty. It's a little bit, but compared to the last generation, it's a good improvement. And they definitely said they focused on NVH, noise, vibration, and harshness, and it's definitely paying off, I think.
Yeah, if I deliberately just put it in the imitation first gear and just hang out here at 5,000 RPM and 30 miles an hour, It certainly sounds considerably more refined than the last one. And you'll notice the steering wheel's not vibrating. There's no vibration coming through the floorboards, through the accelerator pedal,
Right.
etc. So they really have done a good job with that vibration that the previous 2.5-liter engine has had. But obviously, it still sounds like a Boxer. Whether you like that or not, I think that's really more of a personal preference.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with it. I like it. It sounds pretty good to me. It does sound more mature, too, than some of the other four-cylinders in the segment. But there are others out there that, do have a little bit of a more mature tone than this. But I don't know. It's right there in the middle to me.
Definitely has that BRZ Toyota 86-like sound, but smoother.
Exactly.
Obviously, we haven't had this at home to do any cabin noise testing, but this is quieter than the previous generation Impreza, according to Subaru, and I believe them. Wind noise is definitely well controlled up here because we don't have those standard roof rails like we find in the Crosstrek, so I did notice a bit of a difference out on the road. Road noise is pretty well controlled, but keep in mind we have two 25-width tires, so you will find some wider tires in some of the competition.
And if I were to make an initial comparison between this and other competitive models, I would say that maybe like a Corolla hatchback and a Mazda 3 are slightly quieter, but generally this is an improvement over the old one. And again, yeah, not much wind noise.
Yeah, and I'm going to guess that this is probably quieter than the Corolla hatchback.
You
That's
think?
my think. Yeah, I think so. But the Mazda 3 is pretty civilized, as
Yes.
is the CX-30, which are kind of sort of competitors to this as well.
Yeah.
Fuel economy is also a bit tricky to talk about because somehow I forgot to reset the trip odometer before we started driving. We've done a lot of idling and a lot of photo shooting and a lot of obviously some, playful acceleration out on roads like this, but I wouldn't be surprised if this hung out right there at around 29 miles per gallon combined. That's something that Subaru's done really well with their models in the past. Obviously, there are going to be pros and cons to everything. This is not going to be quite as refined, not quite as quiet as some of the competition, not as fuel efficient as a Corolla Cross Hybrid, obviously, but this also has a really low sticker price.
Yeah, you have to keep that in mind. It's definitely a very value-packed model in this segment. And even though that base engine is slower, I think you're getting a lot for the money, especially in that middle trim. So I think there are a few things you could, you could forgive at that price point.
Out on a windier section of road here, I think that Subaru has done a really good job with the suspension tuning. Again, very flat, very level through the corners. This is not where we see the WRX though, and I am a tiny bit sad, I don't know about you, but I'm a tiny bit sad that we don't have a WRX hatch. If you want the sedan Impreza, that's powerful engine, WRX. If you want the hatch Impreza, that's 180 horsepower hatch.
I guess you could consider the GR Corolla to be somewhat of a spiritual successor to an STI wagon or hatchback, but of course it's not a Subaru and it's not going to be the sort of same experience. But the one thing I want to note too is that the ride quality is, even though we have a sportier suspension, I would say, it's very smooth on the smooth pavement we're on. It's very well done.
Yeah, and it's definitely bigger feeling, bigger interior in real world numbers as well than the Corolla hatch. The Corolla hatch definitely feels on the small side. But this also feels, I don't know, a little bit smaller driving out on the road than the current generation Civic hatchback. The current generation Civic hatchback feels kind of big.
Yeah, it definitely feels heavier than this. It feels heavier, for sure. And again, like you said, the body roll is really well maintained in this, so it feels lighter than it is.
And then, of course, we have all-wheel drive standard, so it doesn't really matter what you're doing. If you slow down and floor it around a corner right like this, there's no torque steer. It just goes neatly and nicely around the corner. So I have to admit that even though we don't have as much power as you'll find in the turbocharged Mazda 3 or some of the competitors like the Kona N, etc., there are definitely some compromises on that side of things. Even a Type R, no all-wheel drive there either. And here, it doesn't really matter what the surface is. You get to just floor it around anywhere you want because we have all that grip from the standard all-wheel drive system.
I would like to see a screen, or if there is one, we just haven't found it, but a screen showing you the distribution of the torque on these Subaru models with the all-wheel drive. Obviously,
Subaru doesn't do that.
They don't do that. I wish they did.
Yeah. And they don't really tell us exactly what the power profiles are like in this vehicle, although this all-wheel drive system is generally biased towards the front. So even though its layout is actually pretty similar to, Audi Quattro's classic layout in the A4, 5, 6, etc., and a BMW 3 Series, actually very similar drivetrain layout, this one has the clutch pack between the transmission and the rear differential rather than the transmission and the front differential. So it biases the power towards the front. That seems to just give more stable handling in snow, wet weather, adverse weather, etc., which is exactly the kind of mission that the Subaru engineers had in mind for this. So how much will the least expensive all-wheel drive vehicle in North America cost you? Well, the base trim with the 2-liter engine is going to start at $22,995. That is $5 higher than a base CX-30, but the destination charge on this is just under $1,100 versus about $1,300 on the Mazda. So this is actually a few $100s less expensive. On that base trim, there's really just one option. You can pay $350 extra for 16-inch alloy wheels. Next up is the Sport trim for $24,995. It's going to get you 18-inch alloys, but not these 18-inch alloys. It's also going to get you a sportier suspension tune, a little bit more similar to what we find in the RS trim. You'll also get paddle shifters on the back, the 11.6-inch LCD on the inside, and an upgraded interior, but no leather upholstery. Optional on that Sport trim is one package for $1,900 that gets you the power moonroof you see on this model, blind spot monitoring, and an all-weather package as well. If you want the RS trim, which is certainly more fun than the base model, that's going to start at $27,885. Still a very, very good price tag for an entry in this segment with just about 180 horsepower. That's going to get you the 2.5-liter engine, more standard equipment, still cloth on the inside, which I do think is an interesting twist. At least for now, there is no version of the Impreza that's going to have leather or simulated leather upholstery. It's cloth all the way in this model, likely to help keep price tags low. There is one option package available on that as well. It's $2,070. This model has it. It includes the power moonroof, the power driver's seat, and the Harman Kardon audio system. If you want the upgraded audio system, you have to get the RS trim. It's not available in any other version of the Impreza. You'll notice that for this generation, there are fewer Imprezas than there were before. One less, actually. There are only those 3 different trim levels. 2 with the 2-liter engine, 1 with the 2.5-liter. If you want more oomph, that would be the WRX with the turbo there, or you could step up into some of the other Subaru models that do offer that 2.4-liter turbo. Now let's talk a little bit about the competition, because I think it is kind of weird when you look at the Impreza and its low price tag, the fact that the hatch is the only way to go, and we have standard all-wheel drive. Clearly this is a competitor against the Honda Civic, the Toyota Corolla, and the Mazda 3, but what else is actually like this?
I guess you could also throw in the Mazda CX-30, as you mentioned earlier, because that does have the all-wheel drive standard, but that, I guess, is more like a cross-trek competitor because it is a little bit higher. It does have the body cladding. And other than that, you could maybe consider a Hyundai Kona a competitor to this. It's very similar in size, but we have the new one coming that is bigger than the outgoing one, so we'll have to see how that fits into the mix when we get a closer look at that later this year.
And I am intrigued by some of those small crossover alternatives, I guess you could say. Clearly a Kona, an HR-V, anything in that size category, a Corolla Cross, etc., they're going to be dimensionally fairly similar to this on the inside. They're going to have the option of all-wheel drive. Price tag-wise, they're really going to be quite close to the Impreza as well. And even though the Crosstrek is theoretically the crossover one, and I don't know, a Kona, Corolla Cross, etc., they're crossover-y ones, most of them don't have as much ground clearance as the Crosstrek. They're actually a lot closer to this Impreza.
You could also maybe think about the Chevy Trailblazer, even though, again, that is more of an off-roady kind of oriented car. Not too much, but that's also a similar format to this with available all-wheel drive, but it's probably not as fast as this 2.5 engine.
Yeah, and then, of course, we have the new Chevy Trax as well. And that's why I find cross shops in this category kind of interesting, because if you want the sleeker body color look, which I do like on this more than the Crosstrek, I like the fact that we don't have that aggressive wheel arch cladding right there, the big enormous bumpers in the back, etc. I like this look a bit better, and when you really think about the capability of this versus a Kona, this might not have the X mode system that you find in the Crosstrek, but that's just a software tweak. The actual all-wheel drive hardware is exactly the same, and with over 5 inches of ground clearance, it's really going to be just about as capable as a lot of those entry-level small crossovers.
The one thing to know about the Kona, though, is there are more powerful versions available, like the 1.6 N-Line or the 2-liter N model. So if you want a hatchback that's not, slow like a base 2-liter Impreza, you do have that hatchback alternative to a WRX.
Just remember, if you are shopping in that category for one of those more powerful options, they are going to cost more than the Impreza. So like for like, pretty similar pricing. Very tough decisions out there, I think, for a lot of shoppers, but if you want more power, it is available elsewhere. And that's why I am a little bit surprised that Subaru has not tried to stuff more powerful engines in the Impreza and in the Crosstrek. Who knows, maybe that's coming in the future. We also don't know as to whether or not there's going to be a hybrid system coming at some point for the Impreza. If you're interested in a high MPG hybrid, there is the Corolla Cross Hybrid, which will get about 40 miles per gallon in real-world driving. Definitely consider that if you're looking for better fuel economy. You still want all-wheel drive, but you don't have quite the need for the all-wheel drive system that we find in this Subaru. If you were shopping for maybe $30,000, Brian, keeping in mind that that is the upper end price of this, would you get this, or would you get one of those competitors, keeping in mind that they're going to be a little bit boxier, but not necessarily more capable? They're going to be a little bit more body-cladded. Where do you lean?
I'm very intrigued by the new Trax because of its price point, though it doesn't have the all-wheel drive that this is offered with. But I'm also very excited about the new Hyundai Kona because design-wise and feature-wise, it might be a little bit more modern feeling than this, even though we do have that really nice dashboard. But in terms of all the options coming from that model, I'm very eager to see how it stacks up. But in terms of what's currently available, I do really like the Corolla hatchback. I think it has a really smooth and nicely powered drivetrain to it. So I don't know, again, it's very tough.
For a lot of the competition, like the Trax, the Civic, the Corolla, excluding the GR model, it's going to come down to how much do you want the all-wheel drive system that is standard in the Impreza that's just not available on a lot of those competitors. Let us know in the comment section, and of course stay tuned because we will have one of these at home for complete instrumented testing just as soon as possible. Be sure and find us at Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, all of those social places. See everybody next week.